Where do you find your inspiration? And do you ever worry that the content will go too far or cause offence?
I think we've gone quite far already.
We opened with the Prime Minister fucking a pig, so we don't. I mean, like that's a bit like the opening to Saving Private Ryan in that respect, isn't it? It sort of sorts the. It's a baptism of fire. What we don't do, and this is sometimes when people try and pitch us ideas for the series, I think we don't tend to sort of look at the news or look at the tech pages and go, oh, Samsung have brought out a new chip that goes in your bum and sings at your shits as you do them. We don't tend to think, what's the story idea in that? Although that is a good...
It's a fantastic idea.
Hello?
Sings them lovingly, cradles them out. We don't do that. It usually tends to stem from a sort of a comic what-if idea. That's where the inspiration comes from. And I don't think we worry about going too far, ever. No. I mean, we're... Did
you grow up watching this at the Twilight Zone and Tales of the Unexpected?
Twilight Zone, Tales of the Unexpected, Hammer House of Horror. And also, just there were a lot of... This is something I remember from my childhood, is that it seemed every week there was a controversy over a controversial BBC play. And sometimes there would be things like The Singing Detective, or there would be bizarre sort of one-off, or something like Threads, which was, like chilling and horrifying and not in any way comforting. And at the time when we were first, when we were pitching the show initially, I felt like that sort of stuff was missing from television. It felt like it was.
I think the interesting thing about Tales of the Unexpected in terms of anthologies was that a lot of the stories were in very domestic, safe settings, but they were just terrifying.
Yes.
I think as a child, when you see that, it's really uncomfortable. And I think that's the appealing thing about Black Mirror, taking very normal, often very small personal stories and just twisting them into a very dark place. Because there's just something that sort of resonates more with that than a sort of big supernatural Twilight Zone type.
Yes, it's a reality slightly refracted, isn't it? So it's still very, it's so possible. I wonder if it's something to do with being children of the 70s. Well, we were just bombarded with those sort of Charlie Says type cautionary tales. If you go outside, you'll be electrocuted, you'll get rabies, you'll drown. Donald Pleasance will be, dressed as the Grim Reaper and provide the narration. Do you think there's something in that about?
Oh, I love all that stuff because I'm a terrible neurotic and a massive worrier, and I constantly think that I'm facing death, and so which I am, and those there's something I like about the heartlessness of those old like public information films, or the unsettling nature of that that world that I guess we sometimes try to evoke.
And Dennis Potter, like you were saying, if you're growing up with a Dennis Potter play, which is just baffling, often baffling. To a child, you're totally confused. And that's quite frightening. You sort of go, I don't quite understand what's going on in this world. You don't often get dramas that are allowed to confuse, or to challenge you in such a way.
And in some cases, your shows will run for maybe 40, 50 minutes before you're really clear which world you are in. And that shows a remarkable, quite brilliant confidence in not only the material, but the ability of your fans to stay with.
Or poor structuring. No, I suppose sometimes it is a useful trick, weirdly, so San Junipero, for instance, in that there is a big twist that becomes apparent about sort of 2/3 of the way through. And so for 2/3 of it, I'm withholding information in the script. And that's actually quite a useful restriction to have when you're writing it, because it actually defines a lot of the choices you're making. So you're not just staring at a blank page, there's only this much wriggle room for what you can say that they're doing. And every line that they say has to make sense, like on the broader reality of that they are two old women, basically, in secret. So sometimes it's useful, it's just a useful it's a useful kick up the arse, or it's a useful restriction to have.
But in that one, your starting point wasn't necessarily a love story. It was about going back in time and wanting to do a sort of almost back to the future style kind of repeat fade in a sort of 80s bar.
Yeah, it was because I was trying to think. Well, there was I was trying to think like how could we do because it was an attempt to upend what the show was. I was thinking, well, we're always set in the future. How can we do one set in the past? How can we do one that's hopeful rather than bleak? And because I'd read somewhere somebody moaning that because we'd gone to Netflix, was the show going to become completely Americanized? So I thought, well, fuck you then. Set in California, I eat that. So it sort of it kind of broke all those rules we'd established. Generally,
Has
yes.
I mean, teeing that question up, has the show changed since you've? I mean, obviously, it began life on Channel 4. Did you have to make any shift at all to accommodate a new partnership?
Not really, no.
I think it allows you to tell different stories. I would say I suppose if you're making a show for now a global audience, you are more justified, or you can tell more stories in America or wherever. You can choose the world for that story a little bit more that might have felt odd on Channel 4. So San Junipero, the episode we were talking about, it felt more natural for it to be in America, in California, because a lot of our 80s references are American. Yeah. So it's liberating in that sense.
Yeah, we had a discussion about should it be set in like Brighton or in the 80s, and it was a bit like, well, then it would be you would associate it with like people like crying about the miners' strike. That sounds really dismissive. Like 80s Britain doesn't feel like quite such a utopia in the way that like the teen sort of movies of the 80s feel iconic. And
you expect Judd Nelson to sort of walk in at any frame.
Exactly.